Good afternoon, friends and fans. Hope you're all really well and keeping safe during this crazy time. I'm coming to you live from Bristol in the UK. My name's Tessa Bide and I'm a theatre maker and performer. I have a company called Tessa Bide Productions and we make theatre for young people and their families, and normally we tour it all over the UK and abroad as well. But this year, things are a little bit different because of COVID. So when things were all kicking off back in March, we decided to all of our tours were being pulled. So we decided to get a bit creative and come to you via different means. Hence this, and thank you very much for being here. We started a program of lots of different digital offerings, including live storytellings, digital workshops, so online workshops in puppet making and puppetry skills, and these sessions, which we call our Meet the Team Wednesdays. And this came about because normally when we make a show, we go into a primary school and we rehearse in the school hall, and then we can test bits on the pupils. And what we like to do is go into classes and just speak a little bit about what our jobs are. And the feedback is always that it's really useful and really interesting to learn about the whole breadth of jobs and careers that there are in theatre, and how actually there's loads of people and loads of jobs involved in making a piece of theatre go on stage. It's not just the people that you see on stage. So during lockdown, I thought that we'd take this time to meet some of the people that I've been really lucky to work with over the last kind of 6-7 years of having my company. Different collaborators and artists who I've worked on with different projects. So far, I think this might be our 10th one. So far, we've met a projection designer, we've met a director, we've met designer, a set builder, prop maker, fabricator, a few performers. There's been a whole really interesting kind of array of different jobs, and they're all on our YouTube page and our Facebook here as well. So today we're carrying on with that, but we've got a very special guy and a very special job that is really rarely seen. It's very behind the scenes. We're meeting Stewart Melton, and he's a dramaturg and a playwright. So you might have seen a scribbly page of Stewart's notebook posted earlier on our social media, and we're going to be learning a bit more about his process and what the heck does a dramaturg do? But just before I introduce you to Stewart, I just want to do a tiny little plug. We are currently doing a crowdfunder to raise funds for a brand new project that we're making at the moment this summer, called the Anarchist mobile library. It's an adaptation of our show of the same name, but instead of touring it in a caravan, we're making this into an audio adventure for you guys to do wherever you are. If you're at home, or it could go to schools, it could go to libraries, but it's a really exciting way of coming together as a family, going on an adventure, and it's got some really important messages alongside it, all about kind of making decisions for yourselves, sticking up for what you believe in, and basically changing the world. So if you've got a minute to, if you're enjoying this interview today and you'd like to give back, then please do think about sharing or donating to that crowdfunder, and I'll put the video on at the end as well. Okay, little plug for that over. Without further ado, I'm really chuffed and I'm really excited for you guys to meet Stewart Melton. Woohoo! Hey Stewart.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having us. Where
You're
am I
welcome.
coming? Where am I meeting you today? You're in London, right?
I am in London. I'm in beautiful southeast London, around about West Norwood.
Very good. I love to see little snippets of people's houses, and that is a great bookcase.
Thank
Like,
you
I
very
think you
much.
can always kind of judge a person by the state of their bookcase, and there's lots going on there.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a sort of sensory overload,
I like it.
but thank you.
That's great. So, Stuart, we've met fairly recently. working on Bob, which is a project that I've talked about in a few other of these Meet the Team meetings. Because I met Amy Draper, who is the director of the piece, and Nina Dunn, who's a projection designer, and then also Haruka, who's one of the performers. So it's really nice for you to kind of meet another one of the gang, another one of the Bob gang. And you guys have all worked together lots before, haven't you?
Yeah, a few times now with Amy, many projects, and obviously with Haruka, Nina, and Dai as well, our other performer.
Mm.
Yeah, we worked many years ago now, so it's been a culmination of quite long relationships.
I um I could tell kind of in the rehearsal room how well you guys work together, and you can kind of tell that history that you guys have got, because there's a lot of times when you don't need to kind of say full sentences, or you don't need to fully go into detail, because you've got that relationship that you can kind of, everybody knows, you've got that base level of language and base level of experience already, which is really nice in a devising process, isn't it, to kind of bed into that kind of relationship and that situation. I love that when you get to that point. Just sorting out my other screen. I've seen a couple of people have started logging on. If you have any questions for Stewart as we go, then do pop them in the comments, and I can ask them to Stewart as we go along. So yeah, do chime up and say anything you like. Just keep it clean, guys. Um,
Not difficult questions, please. Easy questions.
Okay, cool. Stewart, you've got quite a difficult question, which is trying to tell people what the heck dramaturgs do, which frankly, people in the theatre industry quite often don't know. So, that's quite a big thing to unpick. No pressure.
Thank you. Yeah, there's not a lot of agreement as to what a dramaturg is. Even amongst dramaturgs, everyone seems to have a different definition. I think part of not the problem perhaps, but the primary source of confusion is the word itself, which is very ancient and is not really being sort of properly defined either. So a dramaturg came into the English language, the word I mean, from ancient Greek via French and German, some point in the 18th century, I think. And
so European.
In terms of its most basic literal definition, it means drama or play worker. But that's not sort of super helpful or specific either.
No.
So I kind of rearranged that in my head to be someone who makes the play work. And by work, that could mean entertain or tell a story or convey ideas or succeed on its own terms. So someone who makes the play work is my basic definition. I'd probably upset loads of other dramaturgs. Angrily, hopefully write into the Facebook right now.
Writing, furiously commenting.
So sometimes this is dramaturgs then described as a researcher, a facilitator of other artists, sometimes an activist for the kind of politics of the work, even a creative therapist, sort of administering to the other creatives, and often as a critical friend. And I think that final definition is the most attractive to me, but I'd probably take away the word critical for reasons I'll explain now. I love the idea of it being a friend to the other artists or to the artwork. I suppose because I see the role as being based in relationships, a relationship to a writer or to a director or to an ensemble, as in say Bob. A friend expects the best of us, and I see it as sort of a dramaturg wanting the best for either the artist that they're working with or the artwork that they're a part of or working towards. A friend will trust us and is trusted by us. And through that trust, they can be honest and say things that we might not like. And that's kind of why I take the critical bit out of critical friend, because I think all friends should be allowed to be critical when they need to be. And that's my sort of potted definition.
Actually very beautiful.
Thank you.
Did you write that yourself? You should be a writer. Oh no, hang on, wait, you already are.
Or maybe I'll give that. So a friend of the work, and a friend of the artist, and a friend of the artwork. And so I know a theme of these talks, the Meet the Team talks that you've been holding, is I want to know how to start doing that job. It's sort of how do we get into becoming a dramaturg, if that's of interest. And it's my strong belief that everyone can be, and to a certain extent already is, a dramaturg. So in the same way that everyone's a critic, everyone can be a dramaturg. And my reason for feeling this is I've got a pretty strong suspicion that almost everyone has watched maybe a piece of performance, or certainly a piece of television or film, and thought, there's something about this that confuses me, or that is dissatisfying in some way, or maybe doesn't make sense. I suspect that's quite a common feeling among many of us. And if you've ever had that feeling and thought about it a bit longer to try and identify what those things were that were confusing or dissatisfying, if you've wondered why those things didn't work, then you are halfway to becoming a dramaturg. The other half is sharing these thoughts or these questions with the creatives while they're still working on the piece in question, so that hopefully they can better understand what they're making and do what they need to do to make it more successful on their terms, whether that's clarifying an element of story, or making something less confusing, or alternatively making something more confusing, if that's the sort of artistic aim. I kind of feel like everyone can be a dramaturg. Everyone is a dramaturg. So many other things, practice will help you kind of identify what things exactly aren't working within or aren't working for you within an individual performance. But I really believe that just as anyone can be an audience, anyone can be a dramaturg.
That's really nice. I think something that I've always wanted in my work is for a family to come and see it, and then the most important thing is the conversation they have afterwards, and basically what we aim to do is be a catalyst for that conversation. And if it can provoke, even if it's kind of going, hey, what was that bit about? And, oh, that bit made me feel really unsure, or that made me feel a bit sad, or, even if it's kind of emotions that aren't as easy as kind of, hey, that was funny and that was nice, then it's provoked that conversation and something for then the whole family to unpick together, and often to talk about quite big themes as well. Like in Bob is about grief and loss and death for some quite small audience members, really. So presenting that in a way that can then allow that family to have conversations which kind of do need to happen at some point, and for some families they have to happen a lot earlier than they should do. And I think what you've managed with Amy in that is to create that catalyst in a really kind of it's quite gentle, but it's quite it's very inspiring and thought-provoking, So I think, you know, all the audiences who were coming out of the work in progress in February, they were all chattering about it, and I think that's really the main point of our work.
I'm glad. I think in some respects the dramaturg is trying to anticipate some of those conversations, or seeking ways in which, you know, finding spaces in which those conversations can happen, both while the show is being made, but also, you know, how it can sort of encourage those conversations after the performance as well. And yeah, as you've sort of identified, the show isn't over until people stop thinking about it or stop talking about it.
So there is no dramaturg school. There is no kind of one set way of getting into being a playwright or being a dramaturg, is there? That like with all the jobs that we've been talking about in this series, there's people get into it by doing all sorts of different pathways.
Yes.
Could I ask you about yours now, or do you want to talk about that a little bit later?
No, we can talk about that now, but I have my notes, so I'll just sort of look through so that I don't get lost in the maze of memory. I have my notes because I want to go way back, because I think it's sort of connected to my last comments about us everyone being a dramaturg, or have the capacity to be a dramaturg, because I think it's connected to our time as children, and the imaginative play and stories that we start telling and enacting from our earliest years. That's really the beginning of where I identify the beginning of my dramaturgy practice. So creating stories, also sort of rewriting existing stories, and things kind of like putting on shows, or I guess kind of role plays now that use the characters of, you know, something I'd seen on television. I guess, like, you know, if in adults we call that kind of fan fiction, but really that's the basis of so much imaginative play as children. And I can definitely trace my sort of earliest sort of thoughts as a playwright, I guess, from that kind of imaginative play and rewriting of either existing stories through different role plays.
It's great when you can trace something back all the way. It's like puppetry, isn't it? Puppetry is such a instinctive thing for children. You know, you start playing with a toy and you might make a sound for it, and then, you know, if you're a professional, that becomes puppetry, but if you're a child, that's playing. And, you know, you can just see the early imaginings of these what go on to be jobs, but really it's a very natural instinct for children, isn't it?
Yes, so I really would like to sort of move away from kind of ideas of you know, you have to do a course, and then you get your piece of paper and you're dubbed, you know, now you are allowed to be an actor, or now you're allowed to be a dramaturg, or now you have learned how to be a playwright. Like all of these, you know, we call them disciplines, or, you know, crafts, or you know, all other sort of high-minded words, and that's not to sort of denigrate or minimalize or any of the like amazing work and training that people have put into honing their craft. But I would hate for people to sort of think of those as a barrier, when our earliest sort of imaginative stirrings are the beginnings, I think, of you know, our life in theatre. You know, to be a human being is to be able to tell stories, and if you can tell stories, then you've probably got a dramaturg and a playwright in you in some capacity.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the sort of the earliest, the more sort of formal route, I guess, was as mentioned, I'm I'm not trained. I did a literature degree at university. I thought I was going to be a novelist, so it seemed like good training for that. About 10 days into my degree, I knew I wasn't going to be a novelist. Or
Really?
yeah, it was quite intimidating actually reading all those very, very good books. I was sort of scared off it, but I got heavily into the drama club and started making shows and did a number of productions each term. And yeah, from there it seemed, you know, I don't know, it seemed like there was no other choice really but to go into theatre making.
And were you
Uh,
always writing, or were you performing as well in those productions?
I performed a little bit, and my main interest there was direction. In
Mm.
part, I was, well, as mentioned, I was quite scared of writing. I was quite intimidated, and uh, I kind of have, uh, I think everyone has a certain amount of perfectionism, and I was quite adept at using my own perfectionist sort of, I don't know, habits to avoid finishing things. I got very discouraged quite easily. So it took me really into my 20s to be able to sort of let go of a bit of my preciousness, I guess,
Mm.
and finish something and it for it not to be a masterpiece. Which was, you know, incredibly disappointing, but also very liberating because I finally managed to do something that I'd wanted to do for, you know, the best part of the decade. So at uni, I was mostly sort of directing and I was acting a little bit, and I devised a show as well. And then leaving uni, I thought I would be a director. I did a bit of work experience, and you know, I've directed, you know, through my working life, but much less so than dramaturgy or writing or making work with young people.
Mm.
My specific route into sort of dramaturgy was in one of my work experience placements. I was filing for the literary department and their incredible sort of library of plays. And I asked the literary director, literary manager, if I could join their readers group. I'd heard that they had a readers group, and I wanted to be part of it. I thought I would be good at it. I'd already in different placements, work experience placements, had read a lot of plays. I think it
Mm.
was an easy task to delegate to someone like myself who
Yeah.
didn't know anything and couldn't be trusted with anything important. So I would read a lot of plays and then write a paragraph about whether I thought it was successful, whether it should be if it was of interest to someone more important than me up the food chain. So I'd done a little bit of it, and but it was joining the readers group, and I mention it here because I asked, and I was very sort of thinking about this before our conversation just now. It occurred to me how throughout my working life, the only things I really regret is not asking for things and more. I think I was too shy or too embarrassed or too intimidated to ask for some of the things I needed or wanted, or to work with a certain person or in a
Mm.
certain building or company. And that was an occasion, you know, quite early on where I asked if I could do something, and to my surprise, I was allowed to do it. I should have learned my lesson then. So that would be the only real bit of advice I'd give is always ask,
Mm.
because it's likely that someone will say yes. So I joined this readers group and went to monthly meetings, read a lot of plays, wrote sort of short reports about them, would debate or discuss them with other readers and part of the group, and just learned a huge amount about theatre and how plays can be constructed and the variety of writing out there. And
So is
I
this
can
readers who was in the readers group, and is that a thing that is, did you pay to join it? How does that work?
Well, so this readers group, this was at the Gate some years ago now, in the sort of early noughties. That sounds really historical now. Um, and the readers group was a mixture of, there were some playwrights, some academics, people writing about theatre in a critical way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were one or two performers as well, or people who'd had a background as performers and then were moving into a different kind of theatre making. And so there was a range of perspectives, from quite sort of analytical, I suppose, to maybe more kind of intimate relationship with either performing the work or actually composing it. And then our literary manager, Penny Black, at that point, her background is in writing and in translation, has an enormous background, sort of reservoir of knowledge in European theatre writing as well.
And were you invited to be in the group, or was it something that you kind of found out about and applied for? Or
Well, I knew it was there, and through my work experience at the theatre, and I
okay,
just asked Penny after the kind of towards the end of my work experience, I asked if I could join.
that was the big ask. Okay.
That was my first big ask, yeah, and to my surprise, she let me in. I don't know why. As mentioned, I'd done a little bit, and I suppose those muscles, as mentioned, have been working since childhood, of kind of curiosity about stories and about how they work and how I felt they might be improved. And this was an arena in which I could start sharing some of those thoughts, and also learn from other people and their perspectives about what made for a satisfying play in this case, rather than other forms of theatre was very much sort of based on scripts. So I worked for this readers group. That was initially, well, some of it was voluntary, and some of it there was paid work as well. They had a translation competition. I was paid for that, and then did some voluntary work as well. And then towards the end, I thought I had plenty of other things to do, and I was less able to volunteer at that point. So I stopped with the readers group, but always was interested in reading new scripts, and friends, playwright friends, director friends who were working with another writer would send me things to read informally, or say, would you be interested? And if I had the time, I was always sort of game for it. I like reading anyway, and I was always sort of curious as to what people were doing, and enjoyed flexing those muscles. Still do a lot of reading for friends, just to see what they're up to, and to, practice, I suppose. And yeah, the conversations that came out of reading those sort of works in progress became my first projects as a dramaturg. So I kind of, I don't know, like slipped into it or evolved into it, from being a reader, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I imagine this has been a sort of common refrain to these conversations, that I don't imagine other people taking the same route. And I do think there are some formal courses as well, and in the United States and in Europe, there's definitely more of a kind of theatre training culture that includes dramaturgy as a specific discipline.
Do you think that's that's kind of very evident in the theatre that we make in this country, that we don't seem to talk about dramaturgy? Or perhaps is it a value thing? Do we not value dramaturgs enough? Or do you think that's...
I think well, I've seen it change, first of all, over my working life. So when I first sort of started making theatre after university, there were very few opportunities for dramaturgs. and it seems like my own generation of theatre makers has maybe through their interest in continental theatre and some more avant-garde theatre from United States has sort of seen a kind of like paid attention to the kind of genealogy of these projects and also the kind of companies that are making them, seen that there's dramaturgs amongst them and that they've made a contribution to the development of those productions and have wanted to emulate it here.
Mm.
So I really feel it's sort of changed. Certainly over the kind of, well, I've been working for about 15 years, and definitely in the last 5 to 7 years, noticed that many more productions have been trying to resource a dramaturg. I think economics, as with everything, has a major effect on what's possible in the UK, pretty much at every level of theatre making. And for the longest time, it has probably seemed like a role that is a luxury, I guess, and perhaps one that many productions can't afford. But increasingly, directors particularly, but other creatives such as the design teams, and increasingly actors as well, have seen the use of having that extra pair of eyes and extra mind working with them. They've seen the value of it, and just made the resources for a production dramaturg attached to either the script development stage or increasingly the rehearsal process as well.
In my experience, it was that thing of kind of working with a dramaturg for the first time was similar to working with a movement director for the first time, and it was an experience of going, oh, it could be so much better with these people involved, and so much easier when there's someone looking at that thing. And yeah, once I kind of, once you've tried it, it's very hard to go back from that, really. But yeah, thanks to funding that has allowed for that, because as soon as you kind of make a team bigger and bigger, it does get more expensive. But when you've worked in that way, you see the value of it, and then suddenly it becomes more of an essential rather than a luxury.
I think a lot of it has come to the openness and generosity of other artists. Previous generations of theatre makers, and I'm thinking particularly theatre directors, have seen dramaturgy as one of their responsibilities, and particularly with regard to script development, and have maybe, without wanting to speak for anyone in particular, but I've seen maybe a sense that they've not wanted another person in their relationship with a playwright in the development of a new script. But as sort of the breadth of work, the variety of work made in this country has sort of become more and more various and interesting, so has the different kinds of processes that people have adopted in making that. And my experience particularly to the last sort of couple of years, the years where I've been making theatre most regularly and at the most satisfying level, at least for me, there's been great sort of interest and respect and desire to work or to collaborate with a dramaturg, and a sense of how, as you say, they can open things up for the other creatives, give them some additional perspective on what they're doing. Actors particularly, but writers and directors as well, I think, have such a sort of intimate relationship to the work in progress that it can be, I say this speaking as a writer myself, that it can be very difficult to see some often quite obvious
See the wood
things
from the trees when you're that close up. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's one of the most basic and helpful things a dramaturg can do is help other creatives see their work afresh, create a space in which they might view it from a different angle, and find new opportunities in it for storytelling, or for richness, character richness, or so on and so forth.
Great. So I think you wanted to do a little bit of showing and telling, and maybe a little bit of doing. I've got my piece of paper.
Yes.
I've got my homework ready, Stuart.
Excellent.
And if you guys are watching at home, get a piece of paper and a pen, because we're going to be doing a thing. I don't know what it is yet.
So one of the ways I was trying to think of a way of bridging my sort of earlier thoughts about everyone being a dramaturg, or having the capacity to be a dramaturg, and how you get those sort of that feeling of confusion or dissatisfaction, perhaps, from seeing something it's not quite successful, in your opinion. How you get from that sort of thought to being able to break it down and identify, it was this thing that didn't work for me. And one of the ways that I do that is by drawing a map, and that will help me navigate my way through the thing I've just seen. So if you have your paper and your pen, I'll grab a photo myself. I've got a big piece of paper in front of me, and I put it in landscape, but that's not compulsory, it just helps me. And I'm going to draw a big L, like this, sort of L on its side. You can see that. So can I ask you to do the same, Tessa?
Sure can. There's my L. It's a scrap piece of paper, so there's a little bit of writing on it, but I'll ignore that. Eco vibes.
Eco vibes, and also like I often feel the kind of paper we have sort of like can affect us sort of subconsciously as well. So I'm using a piece of scrap paper as well, and that for me is really helpful, because it tells me, I can recycle this afterwards. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be masterpiece.
No pressure.
So I'm very keen on scrap paper.
I do.
So we have our L, and I want you to think of something that you've seen recently, Tessa. And something that you think could have been improved. So maybe something, I imagine it might be a piece of theatre that you've seen via Zoom like this, or Facebook Live, or it could be a film or a piece of television. I think that for the purposes of this exercise, a piece of live storytelling, performed storytelling, and please don't tell me what it is. They don't have right of reply, so we won't name names here. But just think over what that show was, or that program was, that film, and cycle through. Maybe think of what it was that didn't satisfy you about it, or confused you about it. I often use that word confused because it could be that the show itself is perfect, and I'm just not smart enough to understand it yet. But we can still map it and perhaps identify what it was that confused me, and hopefully that will make me a better, more sensitive and appreciative audience member. So have you got a show in mind, or a program?
I have. It's actually a film, because I haven't been able to get to the theatre in ages, and I want to do something that's fairly fresh. I'm doing a film because I've spent quite a lot of time on Netflix recently. Me
too. So keeping that, looking at our sort of our L on its side, we've got the x-axis on the baseline, the horizontal line, the y-axis going up vertically, The x-axis, the bottom line, is time. I'm going to write a note just to remind me. And the vertical line, the y-axis, is how engaged, how interested, how much you enjoyed the thing that you were watching. So that's my sort of version there. You don't need to label it. I've just labeled it for the demo. And I want you to sort of cycle your mind back, rewind to the beginning of the film, and touch your pen to the corner of the paper, and just let's just quickly replay the film in your mind. And as time moves on, can move the pen without taking it off the paper to whatever height of engagement you felt it was doing. So if you felt really engaged at the beginning, you can sort of draw it nice and high. And then as time moved on, you became less engaged. You just move the pen to whatever seems fair for the film that you saw. I'm doing it for a different film that I saw at the weekend. Okay. I'm doing it quite quickly, but you don't have to. Just take your time with this. This is mine.
Oh, mine's very very basic. Can you see? Oh no, you can't see anything, Stuart. Sorry. How about I'll turn on my camera just for a sec for you.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you.
I couldn't remember the specifics, but I remember that was vaguely how my interest went. I'll do a quick one of these for you guys. So it started, I think this might flip it round the camera, but it started down here and then it kind of peaked, and then slowly as the film went on, it went lower and lower and lower until I was not very interested. Then just at the end it went back up again.
So negotiate this as best you can. Can you identify where that sort of when the kind of the curve started sloping down? Can you identify a moment perhaps where that started happening?
Sure. I think no one involved in this film will be watching this. It's a big Hollywood blockbuster. I'm just going to say it just in case people have seen it because it might be fun. It was Jurassic World, the new Jurassic Park film. I haven't seen any of the other Jurassic Park films since I was a kid, and I've just written a story about dinosaurs, so I thought I'd watch a Jurassic Park film. And it all kicks off, and it's quite there's quite a lot of potential and promise, and they're saying about there's this all the dinosaurs on Jurassic Park are dying, and it's kind of being debated whether they should be saved or not. And that was a really interesting kind of dilemma. You know, do you spend billions and billions of pounds saving a few species of this thing that, you know, perhaps isn't very useful anymore if it's just on an island by itself, or do you let kind of evolution or extinction kind of run its course? So that was really interesting, but then basically nothing happens for a really long time. They go to decide that they are going to save as many as they can, and they find out that there's some baddies who are trying to kill them or capture them for money, and then basically all of the action seemingly happens in the last bit of the film, because they are kind of leading up to a sequel. So instead of
Mm.
it kind of um, reaching a climax and then kind of reaching a resolution after the kind of peak and the climactic kind of point, it kind of is all going until all of there's an auction to sell off the dinosaurs to like rich spoilers, sorry guys, to rich people who have create wars and weapons and things. They want to use these dinosaurs as weapons. So there's this auction to auction them all off, and then the auction goes wrong and they escape into America. And that's the end of the film, which would normally be the climax of the film. That then you would go on from there, So that's my rundown, Stuart.
So, well, amazing recall of the plot of Jurassic World. And so were we to stay on this exercise a bit longer, and I can show you an example. We could go through that curve or the line that you've drawn, or that we've both drawn, and possibly apply it to a script, or to maybe even to the film itself, rewatch it and see if it maps onto that, or just from memory, try and like label different points. So I'm thinking like the crest of the curve, the point where it kind of goes wrong, that you've sort of identified, how it kind of departs from the kind of environmental, ecological kind of storyline and going into something more conventional, kind of good v bad sort of story there, and the rise when action sort of resumes in the sort of third act, and can maybe even like mark off where the trough of the curve is, where it started getting interesting again. And if the Jurassic World team was still making the film, if they were midway in their filming process, you could show them this map.
They brought me in to tell them my thoughts.
Show them the map and go, or say an editing process, because I've done this at an editing process. I've said, okay, so I understood the story until this point, and then it became much more confused for me. And I was able to use this to map my experience of watching the rough cut. So we could hope that, say, Jurassic World was still at a rough edit, and you can show them your map and say, I really enjoyed it until you departed from the ecological, philosophical investigation and became a conventional action film, or started building up towards the sequel. And you'd have, hopefully, with something visual like that, something maybe grounded in a specific experience of viewing the film, but also like citing like particular moments in the film, you'd be able to convey your experience of it, and persuade them to do better.
And would you aim? I mean, I know that when we make shows, we quite often kind of choreograph what we call like wiggle spots, where like the tension kind of drops, and because I make shows for young audiences, it's a time for them to kind of have a little wiggle, let off a little bit of steam and then get back into it. It's going to be quite hard to keep this graph kind of high the whole way, keep peak interest all the way along. Is there an ideal shape that you work towards with a graph like this?
I don't know. I mean, I think the kind of graph is always contextual, and the thing you put on the kind of vertical axis, the y-axis, is really can sort of change. So I put how engaged or interested you were, but you could put, I have put in other sort of rehearsals how precise I felt that things were, how kind of close it was to how rehearsed. Really, like the map is kind of like a snapshot of your experience or my experience of watching watching a show, and from that point of view, like highly subjective. But its value for me is sure something that I can share with a director like Amy, but mostly as a sort of a memory aid. So I can we've been sort of recalling films that we've seen recently, but would more often do this straight after seeing a show where it was really fresh, or indeed during a rehearsal itself. So why don't I show an example of that? I'm going to bring up an image. Can you see this? This is. Can you see my screen? Great.
Yeah.
So this is an image from a performance called Princess Charming. The performers are Charlotte Worthing and Alex Lutley, who both were co-devisers of the performance, along with Amy Draper, who directed. It was produced by Spunglass Theatre. I'm really sorry, I don't know who took this photograph. So apologies. If you are that person, please tell me, and I will credit it later. So this was a cabaret for children about gender stereotypes. And as a cabaret, it contained lots of different acts, some musical numbers, mimes, dance, comedy skits, even had a kind of comedic acrobatic section. And in advance of one of the rehearsals, or the two dress runs, and one of the first performances, I drew out, I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can show you this with my camera. I drew out the sort of the different axes, and I marked on time the different acts. So I knew what was coming. And then as the show went on, I just drew a little dot according to how engaged I was during the performance. So it was, initially it was just dots. I'm going to show you another example, actually from a different show. This is from Islander. I'm going to show you it because I haven't drawn the line between them. So I actually only had a piece of scrap paper because it was such a fraught dress rehearsal. So I grabbed a piece of scrap paper and then I drew the dots over.
And so the numbers along the bottom, are they the scenes?
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
And so the dots were, just how engaged, or or even how, it might even have been how present I felt the cast were in those, in the performance there. So in many respects, it's not super exact. The kind of graph makes it maybe sound or seem like it's very scientific. It couldn't be more subjective, but it's I find it quite a useful memory aid, and it's a kind of way of telling the story of the rehearsal, of the dress rehearsal, that you can refer back to it and say, okay, well, we started well, and then the energy dipped around Bake Off, but then picked up again in the following scene, had a little bit of a dip, and then, it was mostly sort of on the up. It seemed like Alex and Charlie were feeling a bit better. The show brought on some momentum, but we had a bit of a drop here. I think that was a little error on stage, caused a little drop in energy, but it picked up again quite quickly. And then we could see towards the end here that it was a transition and a lighting cue, I think. I made some notes during the performance as well with the dots, just to help me remember them. And so we could see that it started relatively confidently, but then the second half got a bit needed more attention. That was our second dress rehearsal. So the following day, for our first preview, you can see we had a much smoother curve, and that the kind of can you see that?
And that doesn't take you away from watching the performance too much either. You can manage a few dots and a couple of words. It's not kind of extensive note taking that you're writing pages and pages and not able to really look up at the action. So Yeah, that's great.
Yes, so that's exactly sort of why I do it. I don't always do it, but I do find it useful as a memory aid, and it's as you mentioned, it kind of keeps me present in the performance because I'm not sort of face down scribbling in the dark.
I said in Amy's interview how much I love Princess Charming. It made me weep so uncontrollably that I, you know, when you do that thing where you're like that, I was trying to do that as quietly as I could because there was a very quiet moment in the show, but I was that person by myself, weeping.
And just to your earlier point, Tessa, you could probably, you know, just change whatever you're sort of measuring on the vertical, on the y-axis to, you know, even measure, you know, what did we get those moments of stillness, quietness? What was the
a wiggle point?
Wiggle point, yes. And did you hit the wiggle point, or did you? Because it takes a bit of bravery from a performer to allow space for an audience to have a wiggle point, to have let the energy and intensity drop, so that the audience can catch a breath.
Yeah.
And I can see how that might be a useful thing to measure in the sort of the final rehearsals and first kind of couple of performances. So that's one thing I do to help sort of, but you can, I mean, take the concept of maps and sort of run away with it. I often map the spaces in a show, not just sort of the set, but all the rooms or places that are mentioned within the script or in the story. I'll try and map them, and I think a really sort of fully realized world will have a kind of, you'll be able to draw a kind of coherent map from those spaces, and even the spaces between, there'll be a logic to it. It's quite useful when you're writing, if you're doing a multi-location drama, to be able to, if you're able to draw a map or draw the plan of the house where it's set or anything like that. I find maps really, really helpful.
I'm definitely going to use it with the Anarchist mobile library we're working on at the moment, so thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad to be of help. Should we do something, actually, as you brought up Anarchist mobile library, there's something else I could offer, another exercise that I find quite helpful. Do we have time?
Yeah, my cat is just trying to join in, but this is not time for you, Bertie. Yeah, we definitely do.
So one, as mentioned before, one of the things that a dramaturg can offer to a production or to a rehearsal process is open up a space, or give the director, the writer, the actors, designers, all the creatives involved, a fresh perspective on the thing they're making. And one way we can do that is to encourage them to distill down their ideas to their simplest form. Conversely, we can multiply their views, their perspectives on it, and maybe come at it from more oblique angles. So I want to cast our mind to the Anarchist mobile library, which I know you're in the process of developing into an audio version. And if it's not too cruel of me to put you on the spot, I was wondering if you could give us a short description of the show.
Okay. Of the audio show?
Yes, please.
Okay. The Anarchist Mobile Library is a training game for young people to become anarchist librarians, which means they make decisions for themselves. They fight for what they believe in, and they change the endings of stories that they see around them.
Wonderful. Lovely. Thank you for that. So I very cruelly put you on the spot, and I'm going to do it again. You actually gave me a very succinct description of the show already.
I've been trying to describe this show for like 2 years. So
Well, you kind of spoiled it a little bit for
Oh
my.
no,
I was hoping you'd give me a sort of
I could
ramble.
waffle for ages if that. I can
Well,
go backwards.
the next stage would be to describe it in one sentence. So maybe I'll ask you to say it in a sentence that's, because that was kind of one long sentence. I'm going to ask
Hmm.
you one shorter sentence, one succinct sentence. Can you distill the Anarchist Mobile Library into a single short sentence?
Um, I would say the Anarchist Mobile Library is a choose your own adventure. No, hang on. That is copyrighted. Scrub that.
Yeah.
Um, make your own adventure.
Mhm.
Um, audio. Make your own audio adventure um, for children to create stories and change the world.
Wonderful. Great. Already, like, I feel I've got a stronger idea of what the show is, having just sort of met it just now. And we can go on like this pretty much indefinitely. So I asked you from a short description to compress it into a single sentence.
Hmm.
We could then limit the number of words in the sentence. So I've often started with uh, uh, 17 words. For some reason, that seems to be a magic number. Uh, we can then reduce that to 5 words, 3 words. What I'll do, we'll jump a bit of this process, and I'm going to ask you: can you sum up the Anarchist Mobile Library in a single word?
Empowerment.
Empowerment. Wonderful.
It's not anarchy. It's not as anarchistic as it sounds because we're also librarians. So, yeah, I'm gonna say empowerment.
That feels sort of that. Yeah, that really does capture some of the variety and complexity of your earlier description. Empowerment. Wonderful. Great. Now, with this is a show that you've have quite a, from what I understand, you've got a long relationship with, and you're working
Mm.
on it at the moment. Yeah, I can see that you have a really strong idea of what the show is, what it needs to be, what it's going to offer audiences. But say this was something that was maybe at an earlier stage of development, and
Mm.
you were still sort of feeling your way out for what this show might be or could be. This is a way of kind of putting you on the spot and um, in a way choosing what you think is most important about it.
I kind of want to do it. We've got a show in development that we were going to be R&Ding about now, but obviously can't because of COVID. Called the Magic Snow Globe,
Hmm.
which is way less formed in my head. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really good exercise to do for that. We're starting to write funding applications and things for it now. So I actually find being a producer as well as a maker quite helpful because
Yeah.
writing a funding application or writing a marketing pack or a venue pack to send to tour bookers, I'm basically having to do that all the time. I'm having to distill and distill and distill and to get to the heart of what that project is, and all of that is happening really through my producing kind of
Mm.
stage. And then by the time we're actually in the room making it, I've been doing that work for about a year, whilst I've been doing all that stuff.
It's kind of a sort of habitual grumble of artists, isn't it, to complain about all the funding applications that are necessary. But there's definitely a rigor that they can bring,
Yeah.
sort of forcing us to sort of just put our cards on the table and decide, oh yes, it's about X or it's about Y. It's going to do this thing. Um, yeah, it can be very helpful.
And I hate it when they say sum up your project in 10 words. I hate it when you see that on a form, but really that's doing that exercise, and it makes me go, okay, wow, I do only have 10 words, and this they might stop reading it or they might carry on to read the rest of it because, just due to those 10 words. So better make them some good ones.
Yes. Well, in a rehearsal room, say with this exercise, or in a sort of devising rehearsal room, you could give this exercise to the full ensemble, the whole company, so everyone could decide for themselves what their single sentence description is, what their 3-word version of the story is, and you could compare notes and see what the points of overlap are, or if there's a sort of variety of understanding. Perhaps there's some real convergence. It might be quite a good way of, if we feel like people are tugging in different directions, but can't quite grasp why, this might be a way of helping us identify what we consider important as a group. And indeed, it doesn't need to be necessarily about kind of reducing things, because if everyone's doing it, it could be about gathering lots of ideas. It's a multiplication of ideas. I want to sort of expand this out now in that spirit of kind of multiplicity. So we've gone from a short description to one sentence to one word, and now I'm going to be very, very cruel. I'm going to put you on the spot, Tessa. I'd like you to make a single sound that sums up the Anarchist mobile library.
You're a cruel man, Stewart. You're a cruel man. A sound. Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Not a word, just a sound.
Just the sound, please.
Ha!
Lovely. Great. That's a little bit out of left field. It's a little bit kind of oblique. It's maybe employing a different bit of our brain from the kind of like verbal analytical bit. But it's given us something, and we could talk about it. Like, okay, so is the show about force, or do you see it about being? Is it a kind of there's a martial arts thing to equality? Or is it about conflict, or there's so much discussion that can come out of that sort of simple sound that you've made. Equally, we could apply different categories. So let's expand our options of what the Anarchist mobile library is. If it was a color, what color would it be?
Bright yellow, I would say.
And again, we could sort of, having made that choice, we could then sort of analyze it a bit. We could have a whole list of categories here: color, animal. I've got food or flavors, music genre, smell, texture. I mean,
I've done this for characters before as well. When we think of a new character and say, okay, if he were a song, what would he be? Or if he were a flavor of ice cream, what would he be? And yeah, I love those exercises.
You can make them really specific, or kind of make them more sort of, I mean, generally the more specific the better, because that can give you something really concrete to work with. And hopefully out of that discussions, we'll learn more about the show, but also your relationship to the show. And the theatre comes out of us. It's kind of we are the matter of it. We put ourselves into it. So what we consider important, we should be examining and not resisting, but finding opportunities to put it in the work. At least that's my own belief.
I love that.
So it's a little bit of kind of compression and then expansion.
Thank you. Stuart, I wonder if we've just got a bit of time before we wrap up to just check in with what people have been saying in the comments. Is that all right?
Of course.
So we've had Lee Rayner has said, I've worked with Stuart on a piece at Oval House. He's, capital letters, amazing! Heart eye emoji. So I don't know if you've told her to write that or whether they've just done that, but you've got a fan there. Holly Bond says, which best piece of advice for starting out as a dramaturg? I think you kind of touched on that when you said just ask. You said that would be my only piece of advice. Do you think that still stands in that context?
Yeah, well, always ask. I think that applies to everyone that, any part of theatre making. Really. Ask what opportunity is, and be prepared for perhaps to get the opposite answer to the one you want. But
yeah.
You'll be surprised how often people say yes or no, but and something else might come out of it. Certainly, like where I started dramaturging more regularly came out of kind of conversations with theatre making friends, and in a way I'd already sort of started doing the job without knowing it. And I was doing it informally, just as a kind of fun thing on the side, as practice with other theatre makers. I suppose the key bit, sort of distinction, came when I started calling myself a dramaturg. So that would be the first thing. Maybe it was sort of like own the title, and let people know that you are a dramaturg and that you're available. What was that? Does that respond to the question?
Yeah, definitely. We've also got Alice here saying she loves the graph exercise. It feels like a nice visual way to measure your engagement and enjoyment. She's got quite a big question. Okay. In this strange time, is there anything you hope will change about the theatre industry as we rebuild and reopen eventually?
Goodness. I mean, where to begin? I mean, I think theatre is it's reflective of the larger world, or is in some aspects, and I think it's particularly good in some of its structures and the way it organizes itself in reflecting some of the less inclusive and more damaging aspects of our society, I suppose. So that's, I think of theatre as the presentation of alternatives, as offering different ways of living and imagining a different world. A show like Bob didn't exist, so we decided to make it. We wanted that to be in the world as a way of children being able to make some sense or have some reference with which they could talk about feelings of loss, but also joy. We wanted that alternative reality put into the world. And what I'd like theatre to see is maybe use the imaginative tools that we apply in the rehearsal room to reimagining how the structures of theatre, from the most basic sort of how we run box offices, how we welcome people into our buildings and venues. Pretty much every aspect, I think, we're not applying the same level of creativity or empathy to the audience experience as I feel we ought to. So that would be a really good start. I think more generally, I would love for theatre to value its people more, or value people just generally. I think audiences, definitely, participants, and in community projects and co-created projects, definitely, but also like the theatre workforce, theatre makers. I think the people have been understandably worried about the future of some of our historic buildings that mean an awful lot to people, and it's a theatre is a precious space. It's an important space. It has an unquantifiable value to our sort of social life, our emotional life as as communities, but theatre can exist without buildings. Theatre can be made without buildings. Theatre is people, is audiences and performers. So I think that's more than anything else. I'd like theatre to be focused on people.
I think that is a perfect way to end chat today, Stuart. I couldn't think of a nicer way to end. I heartily agree, and it's such a joy to work with people like you. So thank you so much for coming on today. And if anyone watching has any other questions for Stuart, I know there's a couple we didn't get through. I can always text them to Stuart and get his answer that way. So do keep commenting. If you're watching this on YouTube after we're live, then comment as well. And yeah, we can put those to Stuart. But thank you, Stuart. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and that we can get back into a rehearsal room soon.
Please.
All right, take care. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Before you guys go, if you've got a couple of extra seconds, I just want to say thank you so much for coming today. If you've enjoyed Stuart's interview, then do check out our kind of library of other interviews. We've got, I think, 9 others. We've got some really amazing chats, some great exercises for you guys to do. Next week, we're meeting Bryn Thomas, who's a dancer and movement director. I worked with him on the movement direction of A Strange New Space, my solo show about a child refugee and her journey to find a safe space to live in. So yeah, next week is Bryn, and then we've got Joe Stathers, who's a video and projection designer, lighting designer, the week after, and that's it. So we're going to stop at 12, and you guys have got this really amazing archive to look through. If you enjoyed today, thank you so much, and if you want to support the company to make the Anarchist Mobile Library, and also just to keep running, to help me pay artists like Stuart for coming on and doing these sessions every week, then please do consider donating to our crowdfunder. I'm going to put up a video in a sec which will just tell you a little bit more about the project. This is also what we've got coming on this month. So we've got the Meet the Teams. We've got A Strange New Space streamable online. You can go on Eventbrite and watch A Strange New Space for free or give a donation. And we've also got bedtime stories on Sundays at 6:30. I did one this Sunday just gone, a story that I'd written myself called The Time the Sea Lost Its Sound, and it's got a bit of puppetry and a bit of live music. So yeah, just nice little story for I'd say maybe 4 to 8 year olds. And yeah, we've got all of our other digital stuff on our website on the What's Online page. Thank you so much. I'm going to go now and leave you with the crowdfunder video. I would love it if you could just give it a few minutes of your time to watch that through. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Take care. Bye. Firstly, I just want to say a huge thank you for you watching this video. This is a really difficult time to fundraise for projects, and with all of the uncertainty, it means a lot that you're even watching this video. If you don't know me, then my name is Tessa Bide, and I'm a theatre maker and performer based in Bristol, UK. My theatre company makes shows for young people and their families. You might have met us in a theatre, outside a library, or in the middle of a field. We aim to inspire communities who don't normally have access to the theatre using important stories, a bold physical language, and a few puppets thrown in for good measure. This year we were due to be touring our new show, the Anarchist Mobile Library, around theatres, museums, libraries, schools and festivals, but unfortunately all of our 28 gigs were cancelled due to COVID. So we put our thinking caps on and started to make a plan to get this show out to you guys along with its important message. We made the Anarchist mobile library to empower children to read more and also to change the world. The original show toured in a caravan, and the audience would choose which adventures they would go on and then what happened whilst on them. We were training them to be anarchist librarians and to change the endings of stories they saw around them. This summer, we are adapting the show to be an audio adventure, accessible digitally for you guys, our audiences, wherever you are. Children or families will be able to go online and access the show, but then we invite you to put down your gadget or go away from your screen to fully immerse yourself in the adventure that we'll be taking you on orally. I'm working with an amazing sound designer called Chris Menez, and together we're making these immersive sound worlds where you'll be transported to a pirate ship or a land of dinosaurs, a witch's kitchen, and loads more as well. As you journey on these adventures, your choices will pop up on the screen and you'll be able to change the route of the narrative and leave you hopefully feeling empowered to change the stories that you see around you too. Basically, we want to make a new generation of tiny activists. So it's a really exciting project and one that we think could really inspire and empower young people during a really uninspiring and disempowering time. Plus, it will keep the company afloat and give crucial work to artists who are really struggling to earn a living at the moment. So to fund it, we are rerouting the pot of money that we had to tour the proper show this year, but unfortunately there's a shortfall of about £1,000. Anything that we raise on top of this will go towards keeping Testified Productions running after this project is over. This comes to an end in September, so then I can keep paying all the artists and hopefully that we can then take the actual Caravan show out when it's safe to do so. As we weren't a registered organisation with Arts Council England, when they were giving out emergency pots of funding for organisations, we weren't eligible for these £35,000 pots. So we're trying to make do without, and with your help. So to say our huge thanks, we've got a host of really lovely rewards that we've collected from a few of our different shows, including stunning artwork by the artist Kathy Fisher from the book Perfect. We made a show of that a few years ago, and we've got this artwork in postcard form, in beautiful high quality A4 prints, and you even have the opportunity to receive one of the original paintings too. We have signed copies of my book, The Tap Dancing Mermaid, that I can inscribe for you as well, and you can book me for live storytellings or workshops over Zoom for your family or your class or your Scouts group. So we have lots of ways to thank you. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and I really hope I get to see you in a theatre really soon. Take care. Thank you.